Are you gonna try to do a burnout?
Where the hell is the? Oh, I just found a traction control off.
Across the globe, the Toyota Supra name is one of the most talked about cars among enthusiasts. In fact, when Toyota brought this nameplate back last year, the hype it created on the internet made it one of the most hotly anticipated cars of 2019. I mean, what's not to love about the new Supra? It's got a design that breaks necks everywhere you take it. It's got a turbocharged straight six under the hood that stays true to the lineage of the previous generation. And when Toyota introduced this all-new generation, they actually made it about 200 pounds lighter versus the previous generation models. And today I'm about an hour outside Washington, D.C. on Skyline Drive with the Supra's main competitor, a Porsche 718 Cayman. Now, Toyota engineers basically benchmarked the Cayman when they were designing this all-new Supra, and with nearly identical power and roughly the same proportions, the big question I want answered, has Toyota managed to build a Supra that can finally dethrone the benchmark of the segment? That's what we're here to find out. So when you're talking about a sports car, obviously most enthusiasts are going to want them to be extremely fun to drive, but they also want the exterior design to stand out because after all, in a world full of SUVs, sports cars definitely make you stand out. And having the two cars finally side by side, I'm able to notice quite a few things. By the way, if you guys don't know, this is actually our long-term Porsche Cayman GTS. We've had this car for about 2 years now, so we've been waiting a long time to actually do a head-to-head comparison with the new Supra between the Porsche 718 Cayman. Now, obviously looking at the design, one of them is painted in this bright shade of Renaissance red, the other one is just a plain old white. The Supra is going to be the one that turns heads. In fact, everywhere I took this car, it broke necks everywhere, from BMW to Corvette to Mustang to souped up Honda drivers. It's the one that everybody just kind of stopped, stared, and yelled, "Supra!" I literally had that happen to me several times in just the few days that I've been driving this. Now, the few things you're gonna notice about the Supra right away is it's got a very elongated hood. Remember, there's a longitudinally mounted straight six under the hood. And if you guys don't know by now that this is a car that Toyota co-developed with BMW, you probably live under a rock because it's actually riding on the same cluster architecture that you see on the BMW Z4, as well as other models that range all the way up to the BMW X7. Painted in this shade of Renaissance red, this is a car that really will stand out. I think the design is very much staying true to the heritage of the Toyota Supra. The headlights kind of have a very similar shape to them. They're full LEDs. There are parts about the Supra when I look at it, especially having it parked next to the Cayman, where I think Toyota may be trying a little too hard with the design, because the Cayman, I will say, is practically invisible when you park it next to the Supra. However, some may argue its design is a little bit more restrained, a little more tastefully restrained. It's probably going to age a little bit better versus the Supra, and it's also instantly recognizable as a Porsche. Obviously with the Cayman, it's not quite as elongated in the front, because remember, the engine is not underneath that front hood, it's actually at the back. This is a mid-engine car, so Toyota benchmarked the Cayman directly when they were designing the all-new Supra. So seeing the two cars parked side by side, you can see how remarkably similar they are, especially when you look at the overall dimensions. Both of these sports cars are roughly the same length at 173 inches long, although the Porsche is slightly longer by a half an inch. They both ride on the same 97-inch long wheelbase, although the Toyota is about 2 inches wider, which kind of gives it more of like a muscle car feel when you're actually sitting behind the wheel. Now, these are sports cars, so of course wheels and tires are something that people really like to talk about when you're looking at something like this. The Porsche has 20-inch wheels, and Porsche offers several different wheel options on this car. You can get wheels as small as an 18 all the way up to a 20-inch wheel. This GTS model, of course, has these cross-drilled and ventilated rotors. They're 13 inches in the front, around 11.5 inches in the back. If you'd like, Porsche will sell you carbon ceramic brakes for roughly $9,000 extra, which also changes the calipers to a yellow color. Now, looking at the Supra, Toyota only offers a 19-inch wheel on this car. They're also staggered with tire just like the Porsche, and you can basically take your finish between this look here or an all black finish. You can see the brakes on the Supra are actually bigger. These are 13.6-inch rotors all around, although they are not cross drilled. You also have a red painted caliper. The Supra's tires are actually wider. There are 255s in the front, 275s at the back versus 235s on this and 265s in the rear. Now, one thing I want to point out between the two cars when I look at the side profile, the Porsche has genuine vents around the car where they're actually functional. Of course, this is a mid-engine car, so that vent that you see right behind the front door is real. It feeds air into the engine. The Supra, on the other hand, has fake vents everywhere. There's a fake vent here, there's a fake vent there, there's a fake vent there. Toyota says you could modify the car to give you real vents, but this is kind of where I think the Toyota is trying a little bit too hard. They're adding a little too much to this car to make it look a little bit more aggressive, while the Porsche is a little bit more tastefully restrained. I think a lot of enthusiasts will appreciate the fact that all the vents that you see are functional. So these are two sports cars, and obviously I could talk about the trunk capacity of these two, but who the hell cares about that? I want to know which one of these two cars sounds better. So let's first fire up the Porsche and hear how that sounds. So that's actually the first time I've heard my Cayman fire up while standing by the exhaust. It's one seriously loud car, but it's not the same kind of flat six tone that we're used to with a Porsche. So let's fire up the Supra and see how that sounds. Holy shit, there might as well be flames coming out of this car. Yeah. The Supra definitely wins the sound test. All right, so the Supra obviously sounds better, but which of these two sports cars actually looks better from the rear? Let's start with the Cayman. I think the Cayman's rear design is probably the best looking angle of the generation of the 718. I especially like the GTS trim with the blacked out badges, the blacked out taillights. You've got this wing that pops up at around 70 miles an hour, or you can push a button in the dashboard or in the center console and it'll pop the wing up itself. The exhaust system on the GTS is also blacked out. You can see here it's got a center outlet twin pipes, which also looks good. If you open up the trunk of this thing, the back trunk is technically the bigger one at 9.6 cubic feet. Remember, the engine lives underneath here, so it's not a very deep trunk. Now, in relation to the Porsche, the Supra's rear end is a little bit busy for me. I'm not a big fan of the rear end of this car. I think it looks better from the front of the car. I just don't like the way the rear is actually shaped. I also think it's a little overdone. What I do like is the Supra badge with the classic font is carried over from the previous generation model. I don't particularly love all this black down here. The exhaust system is very much classic on the Supra with the two pipes that are very much on the outer edges of the rear bumper. I also like the reverse light on this car. It's mounted down there. It's nice and low. It's a full LED. The trunk on the Supra measures around 10 cubic feet of space. However, if you're looking to actually pop the trunk from back here, it seems like Toyota forgot about a trunk release because there is no trunk release back here. You've got to use the key fob or open it up from the rear or from the inside of the vehicle. So the one thing that I forgot to mention in this video is the price discrepancy between these two cars, because this Cayman here is $95,000, 40 grand more than the Supra. And where did all of that money technically go? Now, I'm stepping into the interior of this car, shutting the door. It has a very nice solid thunk. This is a German car, it's a Porsche, so I expect nothing less. This interior of the Cayman, while it is a little bit stark, it's not my preferred color choice. However, Porsche basically will let you change the color. You can customize the interior however you want. They'll do it for you as long as you pay a lot of money for it. The one thing I like about the Cayman's interior is it feels very expensive and high quality. The 18-way seats on this particular one here are $3,000 extra. They're heated and cooled. They offer a 2-person memory. The steering wheel here is also powered tilt and telescoping, which is nice. It's a heated steering wheel. A lot of the controls in here, there's a lot of tactile feeling buttons, which everything just has a really nice solid click to it. The ignition is typical Porsche. It's on the left over here. You basically turn it. This one has the Porsche entry and drive, so you don't actually have to take the key out of your pocket and insert it in there. The steering wheel also, this is the GT Sports steering wheel, which I really love. It's got these kind of faux exposed screw heads here on the steering wheel. It feels nice in your hands. It has a really cool drive selector switch here, where it's a little wheel that you turn, a lot of steering wheel controls, which, by the way, the steering wheel controls are optional. on this car. Basically, a lot of things that you're seeing in here is optional, which is why Porsches can get super expensive. The head unit in this car is pretty much, I would say, a throwaway. Porsche has a much nicer looking head unit in the 911. This is just a 7-inch display. It doesn't even have Apple CarPlay. If you want Apple CarPlay, Porsche charges you extra for it, like an extra $300. There is a fairly decent backup camera on this car. It also has parking sensors, but if you're looking for a 360 camera, Porsche does not offer it on the Cayman like you can get on some of the other, bigger Porsches. Overall, this interior, what I like about it the most is it feels open and airy. People who are 6 feet tall can kind of get comfortable in this interior on longer trips. It feels much more spacious. The sightlines are all really, really good. You have cup holders, as you can see here, which are very Porsche. They really fit cans very well, but if you're looking to put like a big gulp here for 7-Eleven, place, basically expect this to kind of fall out as you guys start driving this thing aggressively. So overall, the Cayman's interior feels, smells really high quality. It feels like a car that's probably worth the $90,000 that Porsche is charging, especially if you guys can get it in all the customizable colors. But let's hop into the Supra and compare it, because that car is only $56,000. So hopping into the $56,000 Supra, how does it compare after we just got out of the Cayman? Now, the first thing I'm noticing right away, the Supra's interior is cramped, and I have to seriously crane my neck to make sure my head doesn't hit this roof. So instantly I'm noticing the Supra's cabin does not feel quite as roomy, and that might be a problem if you guys are over 6 feet tall. Now, shutting the door actually has a relatively solid slam as well. Remember, this is a BMW platform, so it has that solid feel that you expect from a German car. And looking at the rest of this interior, this is probably the biggest disappointment with the Supra. Not because it's a cheap interior, although after just getting out of the $96,000 Porsche, this interior feels a little bit more basic, a little bit more business-like. But everything about this interior is all BMW, which is a good thing or a bad thing. I just kind of wish that Toyota had added more of their own unique touch to this car. The only thing that's actually a Toyota in this car is the JBL sound system. It's a 12-speaker JBL sound system with 500 watts of power. It sounds terrible. They should have just used the Harman Kardon system you can get in the BMW. The seats on this car are 14-way power adjustable. They're a heated seat. They come with a 2-person memory on this side. If you guys are looking for cooled seats, not available. If you're looking for a heated steering wheel, frustratingly not available. So there are a couple of differences on this car. You can't customize the interior like you can in the Porsche, although Toyota does give you a heads-up display, which is not available on the Cayman. So starting the car up, you can see the head unit in this car is basically the previous generation of BMW's iDrive system. Toyota calls it Supra Connect in this car. And if you guys have never owned a BMW and you're used to Toyota products, this is going to look extremely foreign to you, because this is literally iDrive 6.0, not the latest version. And I will say, I like how the screen is oriented in this tablet style format, but it's looking a little annoyingly small in this car. It's also not very bright. This is the screen on full brightness, which I kind of wish it was a little bit more bright, because this interior is very dark. You essentially feel like you're sitting in a cave because you sit low, you have this little tiny slither of a windshield that you're looking through, you've got these big massive pillars. So if you guys prefer a car that has better visibility, the Cayman's going to be the one that's going to be easier to live with on a daily basis. If you put the car into reverse here, it does have some pretty decent tech. You can see that's the BMW backup camera system. It does have parking sensors front and rear, just like the Cayman. The camera quality is also relatively good. They do not offer a full 360 camera on this car like you can get, of course, on some of the other BMW products. There is dual zone climate control over here. There's the typical, buttons in here from BMW. The shifter comes from BMW. This is the iDrive controller, which has a little handwriting pad over there. Toyota also very much simplified BMW's drive modes. In other BMW products, you can basically choose between all these different kinds of modes where you can push this little toggle here. Toyota made it very simple in the fact that all you have to do is just push this sport button here, and that puts everything into sport mode. It's either sport or normal setting. I actually really like how they simplified that. If you want, you can go into the sport setting and configure everything individually, but once you have it individually configured, just push the sport button here and it goes into basically its most aggressive setting, which I think is refreshingly simple. The one thing that I don't like about this car's interior as well is the steering wheel. This is exactly a BMW steering wheel, but compared to the one that in the Cayman, it feels a little bit cheap. There's this, cheap piano black plastic here. Some of the controls look like they came off of a BMW from 5 years ago. It's basically just got a Toyota airbag cover on it and a BMW steering wheel. I also think the leather doesn't feel quite as high quality. It's also not a power tilt and telescoping wheel. The seats also, I feel like I'm sitting on the seats rather than in the seats. They're a little constraining if you guys are a little bit wider frame, so be sure you try the seats out. Toyota does allow you to kind of adjust the bolsters here so they squeeze you a little bit more in place. I just don't think they're very comfortable. The leather's just not as soft. You feel like you can't really get comfortable. So my recommendation is try the seats out before you actually decide on this car. The rest of this interior definitely has a high quality feel. It feels nicer than most Toyota products, but I also just feel like BMW was kind of starving Toyota here. They didn't want to give all of the latest stuff that they've got because they were trying to preserve, I guess, the Z4, which is the cousin of this vehicle. But overall, the interior, I want Toyota to offer more colors. They need to also make the seats a little bit nicer, and they need to offer things like cooled seats, a heated steering wheel, just to bring this car into the level of luxury that you expect for a $55,000 car. So just like the, wow, this isn't opening, sorry. I didn't pull it twice, my bad, BMW. So just like the previous generation, Supra, when you pop the hood of the new one, you also find a turbocharged straight 6-cylinder engine. Now, pulling off this fancy little cover here, you can see it is actually a longitudinally mounted straight 6, and looking at some of the badges underneath there, you're gonna find quite a few BMW badges, because remember, the engine and transmission of this car comes directly from Bavaria. It's a 3-liter turbocharged straight 6 that makes 335 horsepower and 365 pound-feet of torque. Now you should know, this one here is the 2020 model. For 2021, Toyota has actually upped the power of this thing to 382, which is the same horsepower as the BMW Z4. I'll be testing that car very soon in the next couple of weeks. There's also a new 4-cylinder turbo option that has about 255 horsepower. There'll be a separate review of that. It all goes out through an 8-speed automatic. As you guys know, a 6-speed manual is not available on this new generation model. And Toyota says you'll get to 60 in around 4.1 seconds. It weighs roughly 3,300 pounds, so it's about 200 pounds lighter versus the previous generation model. Now, in contrast, the Cayman, which I want to show you guys what's underneath the hood of this really quick, because by now, most of you have probably figured out that there is no engine compartment underneath here because the Cayman is mid-engine. Underneath here, instead, you're gonna find around 5.2 cubic feet of space, but Porsche basically fights back with a 2.5-liter horizontally opposed flat 4-cylinder engine, the turbocharged engine that makes 365 horsepower and around 309 pound-feet of torque. Now, of course, this engine has actually been replaced for 2021. That's right, Porsche replaced the flat 4 that's in the GTS of this one with a 4-liter flat 6 that makes 394 horsepower. Hopefully, I'll be able to do a review on that soon. But the Cayman, you should know, is the lighter option. This car weighs around 3,100 pounds. You can take your pick between either a 6-speed manual or a 7-speed PDK, which this one has here. Porsche says 0 to 60 is around 3.9 seconds for the PDK model. And fuel economy of the Cayman is actually the one that's a little more thirsty. The Supra is rated to get around 24 in the city and 31 on the highway, while the Cayman is actually rated at 20 in the city, 26 on the highway. So Porsche technically replaced the flat 6 with that flat 4 to get better gas mileage, but this is the car that's actually more efficient. But regardless of numbers, these are sports cars. So obviously I want to get them out on the road and see which one of these is actually more fun to drive. All right, so we're in the 2020 Supra first because this is the newcomer, although it has a lot of heritage still. You guys all know it's a BMW underneath, so let's get started with the driving scene, shall we? Traction control is in its off mode, but stability is on. Oh, listen to that straight 6. Ooh. What an engine. You know what? This is the B58 motor that you find in everything from a garden variety BMW X5 to just a 5 Series. Holy moly, does this car really know how to make this engine scream? It's just so charismatic, has a lot of power, a lot of torque. It's a single turbo, it's a twin scroll design, so there's very little lag. And this is one of the best, inline 6s that you can buy today. One of the best modern inline 6s because of how responsive it is. It's paired with an amazing 8-speed automatic, which can shift almost as quickly as the dual clutch that's in the Cayman. I mean, floored there in sport. Listen to the noises this thing makes. Oh my God, this thing has only 335 horsepower, and typical BMW, it's completely underrated. 365 pound-feet of torque, so this is more torque than the Porsche, obviously. Oh. And everything about the Supra just feels like you're driving a sports car. I mean, it is very, very stiff feeling, yet not totally uncomfortable. The suspension also has the adaptive damper, so this has I have it in sport mode now, and it's making the car even more firm. It doesn't have any body lean. The steering in this car also is relatively good. It is quick, precise, but it could give me a little more feedback. The one issue I have with this car is just the visibility. The visibility is not great. It's kind of like the Camaro and the Mustang. You kind of feel like you're squinting out through this little slither of a windshield. The seats also, I think they could be more comfortable. I don't particularly think they hold you. I don't feel like I'm sitting like in the seat. I feel like I'm sitting on the seat, which is kind of a disappointment. I want to feel a little bit more like comfortable, which we'll get into the Cayman later. We'll compare the differences, but you know, that exhaust right there. I could never get tired of listening to the crackles and the bangs and the pops. Oh my God, that is phenomenal. This is the factory exhaust, and the fact that Toyota, you know, approved this to sound like that from the factory is an incredible, incredible thing. Because you know a Toyota is not gonna have that kind of noise from the factory with those crackles and pops. The Japanese think that's just kind of like they think it's a wasteful noise. I will have it all day long, but yeah, not in the, not the Japanese. They tend to not like stuff like that. I'm just looking for a straight road to do 0 to 60 or launch control.
That's fine. I'm on your ad stock, so I'm trying to keep you go faster. It's just that I want the camera shot to be as close as possible.
Gotcha. Sorry, this is it right here.
To make sure no one's coming around the corner. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna actually do a burnout really quick.
So there.
Oh God, okay.
Stay on the road.
All right, so now let's try a launch control really quickly in this car. It has it through an 8-speed auto. Ooh. The back starts to dance for sure when you when you try the launch control. Remember, this is a rear drive car, but Toyota says 0 to 60 in 4.1 seconds. I have seen it quicker than that, though. The quickest I've seen from Car and Driver was 3.8 seconds. And this is one fast car. It is plenty quick, but then of course, technology has moved forward and you can get cars that are, you know, under 4 seconds easily. A lot of Teslas will still smoke this car, unfortunately. But, you know, Toyota obviously could just leverage BMW's connection with BMW and you know, take the 500 horsepower version that's coming in the M3. I would love to see something like that show up in this car. What amazes me so much is how easy it is to do burnouts in this thing. It just loves to drift so easily. It's almost like Toyota tuned it to do it, because they probably did, and that's the thing that made the Supra so popular with tuners and enthusiasts. It's just the ability to get the back to step out, yet it doesn't really feel like it's trying to kill you. If you guys have some moderate experience with rear drive cars, this is a car that you'll just enjoy driving day in and day out. From the noises it makes, to the steering feel, to the chassis, you know, to the exhaust system. It's just a phenomenal driving car that I want to get into every day and just drive on a curvy road like this and just enjoy it. All right, so now we have switched over into the $40,000 more expensive Porsche. And I'm sure probably a lot of you are wondering, why the hell is this car almost twice the price of the Supra? Is it actually worth it? So we just topped out of the Supra and I had a ball in that car. Let's see if the Porsche is basically worth double the price.
Give this Highlander some space. Remember, you're in front whenever you're ready.
And I've got my camera guy who's driving the Supra in front of me, so you might see the car in the background, obviously. And we're on this amazing road about an hour outside of the DC area. Skyline Drive is what it's known as. And we're gonna have some fun. Couldn't have asked for a better day to be in two sports cars on a curvy mountain road.
You good? You're in front. So.
I'm in front. Oh, sorry. Yes, it was my turn to lead. Alrighty, so. Now, the Cayman has theoretically more horsepower than the Supra, 365, but less torque, 309 pound-feet. This is a 2.5-liter turbocharged four-cylinder. It's a flat four, which a lot of people gave Porsche a lot of grief when they switched to this powertrain because that signature six-cylinder snarl is gone, and it's replaced by this kind of guttural, rumbly, Subaru-ish noise, which still sounds really good. I like the rumble of this car, but it doesn't sing the way the old flat six used to, or the straight sixes in that Supra. So when it comes to sound, I'm going to give it to the Supra, which is a shame because Porsche typically does an amazing job with this, but this flat four, while it does sound different and unique, it doesn't sound as good as a straight six or a six-cylinder, so that's kind of where I have my issue with it. Right off the bat, immediately, I'm noticing the Cayman is easier to live with and sit in because you have a much better feel in this interior. It's easier to see out of. There's less in terms of this massively long hood. The windshield is larger. The side mirrors are a little bit bigger. The seats are also way more comfortable. We're talking way more comfortable. These are the 18-way adjustable seats for $3,200. They're heated and ventilated, which again, it's optional to get the cooled seats. But the fact that, you know, Porsche offers you a much better seat, it's pretty much, you know, what you expect from the company because you can customize this car to your heart's content. And a lot of people tend to do that with a Porsche. And you can also get this car with a 6-speed manual still, or this 7-speed PDK. So again, that's going to be, you know, for somebody who's looking for a U-shift it yourself, the Supra doesn't offer something like that. So you have to kind of keep that in mind. The steering in the Cayman is also heavier feeling. I feel like the car gives me a little bit more of a planted feel, a little more confidence, because remember, this is a mid-engine car. So right away, I'm noticing that the car has a more balanced feel, less tail happy, which is, you know, what you probably want if you guys are going to be attacking a track. But the Supra is probably the more fun option if you guys are wanting to do something like that. But really what disappoints me the most about the Cayman is probably the noise. I don't like the noise of this flat four, especially after just hopping out of the Supra. It's kind of a deal breaker, which is why Porsche has brought back a 4-liter flat six that you can buy in the 2021 Cayman, which is now the Cayman GTS 4.0. This one here is a 2019 model. It doesn't have, of course, the 4-liter, which now makes 394 horsepower. That's kind of a response to what Toyota did to the Supra, where they added, you know, an extra, you know, 50 horsepower for 2021. Porsche's launch control is definitely easier to use than Toyota's. You kind of just put it in Sport Plus. I don't even have to turn off the traction control. Just floor it and let the revs up. Oh, I missed doing that. Wow, yeah, this launch control is way better than the one in the Supra because you guys saw the Supra got a little tail happy and sideways. This just puts the power down like an all-wheel drive car. Unbelievable. Ooh. Oh. But you know what? Even though this engine doesn't sound all that great at lower revs, it will rev all the way up to 7,500 RPM, and the Supra stops at around 6,500 RPM. So you get an extra 1,000 revs here. Oh. So it's not like the Cayman is boring. This car is more serious. It's a little more focused. It's the one that you're probably going to get better lap times in. You're also going to get to 60 a little bit faster. We're talking, Porsche says 3.9 with the PDK. I've seen it as quick as 3.6, so it's a couple tenths quicker than the Supra, but as long as you use the launch control, because if you don't, there is a noticeable amount of lag in this car, and it feels a lot slower until the boost kicks in. But you got to use the launch control because it dumps the clutch at 6,500 RPM while banging off the limiter. That is one of the best launch controls in the industry, and leave it to Porsche to do something like that. So in terms of a daily driver, I might prefer to be in this thing a little bit more. But in terms of something more fun to drive, the Supra offers a lot. And if you like tail-happy shenanigans, that's the one that you're going to go for. And you're going to do it while saving about $40,000 on the price. Are you going to try to do a burnout?
Where the hell is the... I just found a traction control off.
God. Look at the smoke back there. Oh my God, that cloud of smoke is hilarious.
I hope that looked good.
So as an enthusiast, getting to spend the day with two of these fantastic sports cars on this beautiful spring day with this gorgeous scenery and this beautiful road that we're on here on Skyline Drive is probably a dream come true for me. And it really gave me the opportunity to test these two cars back to back on curvy roads, being able to drive at about an hour outside the DC area to figure out which one of them is actually better. Now, of course, earlier I had mentioned the gigantic price discrepancy between the two cars. The Cayman is $94,000 while the Supra is $56,000. So why is the Porsche double the price and isn't worth that money? Well, as you guys know, this is a car that we've had for about 2 years now. I've spent a lot of time with the Cayman. I really enjoy the car. It's got several things that I think make it a Porsche. Obviously, it's a very serious car. It's a track toy. If you guys are looking for the best track numbers, this is the car that you're going to want to do it in. It puts down power like an all-wheel drive car, despite the fact that it's rear drive. Its PDK is still one of the best transmissions in the business. The 2.5 liter flat four has lots of torque down low. It also makes this car bloody fast. It just doesn't have the sound. I definitely don't like the sound of this car, so I'm anxious to drive the 4 liter flat six that you can get in the 2021 model. This is a car that very much I could see a lot of people owning and daily driving because it's very comfortable to drive and use on an everyday basis. Now, in contrast, the Supra is a car that gets a lot more attention. The Porsche is practically invisible when you guys have the Supra parked right next to it. It's also a very fun car to drive. In fact, I actually found myself preferring this car on these curvier roads, even though the suspension is not quite as firm as the Porsche. The fact that this car is very drift happy, the engine noises that it makes, the transmission, the 8-speed auto shifts almost as good as the PDK in the Cayman. It's also a lot smoother because even though that's one of the smoothest PDKs you can drive, when you have a torque converter automatic, and it just kind of shows you how good automatics have gotten over the years, you're really seeing a lot to like about the Supra. Really what the Supra falls short for me is the interior, where it's not quite as luxurious or differentiated from its BMW counterpart as much as I'd like. It's also, the seats need a little bit of work for me because I don't find them to be comfortable. It's also a little bit more cramped. Now, being only 5'7", I found the interior to be usable for me, but if you guys are over 6 feet tall, you're gonna wanna prefer the Porsche. But really what it comes down to is the huge price discrepancies, because I do not believe the Porsche is worth nearly twice the money of the Supra. I think Porsche is just charging you that much money because of the Porsche badge. Really, I found myself wanting to grab the keys of the Supra more. This is a car that has a lot of heritage with it. It's extremely fun to drive. It's got a better sounding engine, and for $56,000 for this loaded up premium version, you can't beat the price. Now, of course, some of you might say, well, what about the markups? There was like $20,000 to $30,000 markups on this car when it first came out. I've been talking to some of my local Toyota dealerships around here in the DC area, and they're charging around sticker for these cars now, but also keep in mind, Toyota is introducing a 2021 Supra that has roughly 50 more horsepower than this. So if you guys are looking to buy a sports car that doesn't break the bank, that will always put a smile on your face, I can confidently say that the 2020 Toyota Supra easily wins this head-to-head for me, simply because it's just a strong value. It turns heads everywhere you go, and I found myself wanting to pick up the keys for this over my own Cayman, which is a really sad thing to say, but it kind of shows that Porsche needs to step things up for the next generation Cayman, and Toyota is kind of on a roll. They're introducing more power for this car for 2021, and just look past the fact that it's a BMW, which is technically a good thing, and you're left with one of the best sports cars that money can buy. But with all that said, I hope you guys have enjoyed my head-to-head comparison between a Porsche Cayman GTS and the 2020 Toyota Supra. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at redline_reviews. Like us on Facebook, and as always, guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll catch you all in the next video.